Good evening, everyone. Hi, Jeff. How are you, sweetheart?
Hey, Andrew. I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. You might want to turn your volume down just a smidge because I
Okay,
have an echo on this side, which will, for an hour, drive me insane. Okay,
understood. And I
okay.
don't want to do that.
Oh, well, that's kind of redundant. I think I'm already there.
I
Af-
am too. All the best ones are, right?
We are. After the weekend that I had in Michigan at the Upper Peninsula Michigan Paracon, which was wild.
I want
Um,
to hear about it.
well, my promoters, the promoters, Tim Ellis and Brad Blair, are going to be on A World Awakening in an
Oh, nice.
hour.
Okay, well, I'll be watching because I was wondering. I wanted to be there this year so badly. Like that's one of those events that every year I'm like, next year I got to be there, and then I'm always like, oh shoot, it's next week. So,
Yeah, I know. And it's just amazing how incredibly fast time flies. It does.
indeed,
Here, let
especially
me,
when you're having fun.
well, or you're working yourself to death, or, combination of the
Yeah,
two.
or trying to find a way to combine those two things.
Well, it's really nice to be with you again and very nice to welcome all of our viewers and to be able to say class is in session.
Yes.
I had a week of lessons learned, but the most important lesson that I learned this week is that I can't do what I do alone.
Hmm.
And if I didn't have Lynn and Jeff Bowling to help me with every single step of the way, from picking me up in Detroit to driving me 6 hours north to Sault Ste. Marie,
Hmm.
to running my table, to running my life, to keeping me fed, to getting me from point A to point B on time. If I didn't have those two earth angels with me up in Michigan, I would not have been able to do what I did. I
Yeah.
wouldn't. And I think it's a lesson that we all learn early in life. It takes a village to raise this idiot. But I'll tell you what, every now and then, it is a glaring just an absolutely glaring example of the necessity for having help in
Yeah.
this life. You
Absolutely.
know, we
Yeah.
have to have help.
Yeah.
We have to have our loved ones around us. We have to have, and I mean, these talk about salt of the earth people. You've met Lynn and Jeff,
Yeah.
they are, they are just everything to me. And I am so grateful. I am so grateful. A lot of people spend their lives thinking, I can do this. I've got this, and just work themselves to death because they think that asking for help is a sign of weakness.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that it's one of our best strengths
Yeah.
is when we're humble enough to say, I can't do this alone.
Yeah.
I cannot. And could you please help me? And
Yeah.
then it gives us an open door toward gratitude. And, I was also grateful for the fact that, well, it took me last Thursday, I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning to pack because if I pack too early, Buttercup goes into complete meltdown
Mm.
because there's luggage involved. And that would mean mommy's leaving.
Yeah. And dogs know what that means. Yep.
Yeah, so I slept for 4 hours, and then I got up and I packed at 3. My ride, Kristen picked me up at 5:30, and we didn't get to, the venue until, I think, 11:15
Mm.
that night. It was like a 20 or 22-hour day for me,
Mm.
and then I have to do you know, then I have to do the event.
Yeah.
Um
Mm.
and they kept me on my feet and they kept me hydrated and they kept me filled with chocolate and they kept my heart filled with love. And
Yeah.
so if Jeff and Lynn are watching, I adore you. I thank you, and I am deeply, deeply grateful to you for all that you did.
Mm. That's a beautiful, beautiful thought. Even just speaking in terms of archetypes, like biblical archetypes, in Genesis, in the opening chapters of Genesis, when God sets about creation, he says it's not good for man to be alone. But all the while, man had been in a garden with God. And so the principle is that man and God together still equals man alone. That we can't do this. There's no such thing as just, me and God or me and higher source doing something. You and that higher source, whatever you name it, you and that higher source together is still you alone. We need people. We
Yeah.
have to rely on other people. I'm a bit of an individualist depending on the conversation I'm having and the mood I'm in.
Yeah.
But I'm a fan of Rene Girard's concept of us being individuals. And we really are, even when we are alone, we're a complicated mixture of the influence of multiple people. So we're never truly individuals because we are a combination of the influence of everyone who's ever touched our lives. So we might as well just embrace that and embrace other people.
Yes. Well, I think that was a very hard lesson,
Mm. For
particularly
me too,
during
because I'm a loner.
COVID.
I don't. Yeah.
I mean, when the only way that you could show someone how much you loved and adored them was to keep your distance from them.
Yeah.
And we suddenly realized what, social being the root of society.
Hmm.
We are social beings. We are creatures of contentment when we are with others,
Yep. Yep.
because we are expressions of our own human emotion. And
Yes.
if we don't have anyone around us to express those emotions with, then they build up inside of us. And I mean, look at the extraordinary rise in mental health issues, particularly among young people
Yeah.
during the pandemic. Now, COVID's not gone. COVID's never going to be gone, but the very worst of the pandemic is over.
Yeah.
But these kids are still struggling. I mean, the suicide rate went through the roof,
Mm.
and the anxiety level went through the roof, and people either got closer with their immediate family, or they became isolated
Yeah.
uh, from them, or they didn't have anybody. So many people in New York City the first couple of months of the pandemic, when it struck and it hit New York so hard.
Hmm.
So many people who were so terrified to come out of their apartments, or people who were bedridden, or who were left alone. They died alone in their apartments,
Yeah.
and without anybody, even necessarily knowing that they were there.
Yeah.
Um, ordering food, having it put out in the hallways, and they didn't have any physical contact with anyone, and yet
Yeah.
they still died from COVID. I mean, it was a very, very scary time.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're all still feeling the hangover from it quite a bit. Like you said, it's definitely not over. Um, but we are certainly hungover from it, I think. And I think a lot of, like you said, the rise of mental health issues, just this sense of isolation. I mean, I think it's really starting to hit us what happened to us during that period of time.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
it was extraordinary.
it was.
It was extraordinary, and I'm so glad that we can come together and be social creatures again, because it's what keeps us healthy.
Yes.
And even though, I was very nervous about going to Michigan, because there were about 1,500 people that came
Mm.
to this event. And, I can't mask up and keep 10 feet distance from
Right.
all of these people that so many of whom that I know and love. And, maybe only get to see once a year up there, people that come in from Canada, and people that I don't have a chance to visit with any other time.
Yeah.
And so to be able to come back together again, I'm not going to say, keep your physical distance from me. Here, let me throw you your book across, the showroom
Right.
floor.
Right.
No, I mean, it is a calculated risk
Hmm.
that I take every time I hug or kiss another human being, a
Yeah.
calculated risk that I take. But
Yeah.
then I come home and I have, a mother who would not survive COVID,
Mm.
or anything else for that matter,
Yes.
RSV or, whatever else is the flu,
Hmm.
that's circulating in our environment. And so for the first few days that I was home, I wore a mask in the house, an N95 when I was anywhere near her.
Hmm.
And it's just an ever-present danger that we have to cope with. And then next week, I'm home this weekend, but next weekend I leave on the 7th, and I'll be in Rhode Island until the 12th,
Mm.
to do the Ocean State Paracon. So all my Rhode Island people will all be together, and we'll do that all over again, which I'm so thrilled and can't wait to see them. And that's one of the best events in the whole country. I'm so thrilled. Ken DaCosta and Julie DeMay and the whole Rise Up Paranormal team work their hearts out to make
Mm.
this event a screaming success.
Yeah.
And we're showing The Conjuring at the local theater in town. That's going to be wild. Next, not this weekend, next Saturday night. And it's going to be crazy and busy. And I'll grab a few hours of sleep here and a few hours of sleep there. But for the most part, I am going to be up and surrounded by people.
Hmm.
And so again, that regimen will need to kick in when I do come home to protect my mother. But it's worth it to be able to be with them and hold them in my arms and love them. And I'm nothing without these people. I
Yeah.
am nothing without these people in terms of my career.
Mm.
um, and I'm always grateful for that. We talk about gratitude on this show a lot,
Yeah.
as we should, because I think that it's an important reminder to people to pause and reflect and count your blessings every single day,
Yes.
because there are so many people that are not necessarily blessed with the same kind of companionship that we are.
Yes.
And this, the same in your beautiful family and my beautiful family. And we really are very lucky to have what we have.
Yes, we
And
are.
there are a lot of very, very lonely, isolated people in this world. And my heart breaks for them, because I know the joy of being in my own tribe, my own little clan, my own little mini society.
Hmm.
Like my sister, Cindy, just walked in the house today. We didn't even expect her, and it was like, "Wow, Cindy's here." And then a couple hours later, her daughter and her grandson walked in, and we're like, "Wow, they're here." It's they only live a couple of miles down the road, so if they just happen to be passing by, they stop to say hi to Grammy and to us. And there's a sense of community right within our own family,
Yeah.
because we share the community.
Yeah.
And so it's a wonderful thing to do. Oh, by the way, don't let me forget, you are going to do a special 2-hour episode of Soul School, next Friday night, because I'll be lecturing somewhere. I feel certain of it. And So up in Rhode Island. So you're on your own for 2 hours, which I have supreme faith and confidence that you will handle it splendidly, as you handle everything splendidly. You really are a gift in my life, in my world, Jeff. You really are. Really, from the moment that we connected, I knew that we had great things to do together, and we
Yeah.
talked some about that this week.
Yeah.
Would you like to expound on
Sure.
this
Yeah.
shift that took place? Now,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it happened because of the moon, even though I know a
Yeah.
great percentage of our bodies is actually water, and we feel the same tug that
Yeah.
the tidal, waves, the ocean does.
Hmm.
And it has some effect on us, even if it's just a minor thing, or if we're the ones that make it spiritual, if we're the ones that decide that
Yeah.
we're being affected by this, this full moon
Right.
phenomenon. But you and I both went through kind of a shift this
Yes.
weekend,
Yeah.
or this past week. And so we chatted about it a couple of days ago. And I wanted to, I said, well, that's what we can talk about on the show on Friday night. So have at
Yeah.
it. I'll hop in
Okay.
and strike a
Okay.
chord.
Um, I the feeling is 100% mutual towards you as well about what a gift you are in my life, and in so many ways. And these Friday nights are always a joy and the highlight of my week. And so, anyways, the feeling is very much mutual. But yeah, concerning this shift we both sort of felt, I'm not one. I'm not one to ever claim I have a prophetic word of any kind, necessarily, but I'm going to say I kind of feel like I have something like that burning in my chest tonight. And you can decide whether it's prophetic or pathetic. I guess we'll see in the comments which it is. But um but I have had a week, man. Actually, I have had 2 weeks that were really intense. Really intense on a lot of levels. Really intense spiritually, really intense just physically. Those two do tend to connect because as above, so below. Um, and I've learned a lot in the last 2 weeks of my life. There has been a lot that was either previously downloaded like a little zip file that was far more dense than it appeared to be on the outside, that was just simply unzipped this last couple of weeks due to certain circumstances, or it was all downloaded. I don't know, but it was an intense couple of weeks. And so let me try to unpack some of this. And if at any point you got something to say, please, by all means, shove a spike in the spoke of my little rhetorical bicycle and step in. Um, so this week, there was a blue moon this week, right? And I was sitting up in my room reading Alfred North Whitehead on chaos, because that's been where I've been dwelling lately. And I was feeling this intense energy, for lack of a better term, and the moon is streaming in through the windows and the little beaded curtains, and it felt amazing. And there was just a power there, And you texted me about it. You were out. I think you were outside, probably. I'm guessing in it yourself, and I don't
Yeah.
know for sure, but you were just saying, enjoy it. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know this was a significant moon. I just knew it was beautiful. Sometimes stuff just passes me by. And so I looked it up, though, out of curiosity. And this is lunar phenomenon that won't be visible as it was on that evening for 14 years. For
Right.
14 years. Now, I'm no mathematician, but 14 divided by 2, I believe, is still 7.
Yeah.
And that instantly took me back to the work of the spiritual teacher G.I. Gurdjieff, who talks about the fact that life tends to happen in sevens. That our life happens in 7-year cycles, give or take, right?
Mhm.
And so that means 7 plus 7. That's 2 7-year cycles. And if it's not going to occur again for another 14 years, that means we're at the end of a cycle of 7 years as well, right? Because that means we're at the end of it. And like within moments, I was just scrolling through my Facebook then, and I went to my memories, as I typically do, because it's just a great way to see what you were doing 10, 12 years ago. Usually finding old pictures of my kids and stuff. And it popped up that 7 years ago on that day was the day that I had started a significant shift in the way that I was doing ministry. That I had resigned as a pastor probably about a year prior to, I believe so. And then that day I had launched something new. And it was that day that I had started something new 7 years ago to the day. And then it also hit me like, Jesus, it's been 7 years since my last book was released. Now, I've published other people's books since then and done things like that. But since I actually have written my own, I've been writing like 20, but the last time I actually published it was 7 years ago. And I started to think back about a lot of the things that had shifted in my life and realized it was all 7 years ago. And I realized, oh my God, I'm at the end symbolically of a 7-year cycle. And that's what I've been feeling because there had been so much chaos the last 2 weeks of my life. Not necessarily bad chaos, because chaos isn't necessarily a bad thing, right?
No, it's not.
It's not. It's the nature of the universe, but it has a purpose. And I talked about it last week a little bit, but well, let me take it to Sunday school and share a little Bible story with you, and then we'll pull it apart and try to make this connect. So I was taken to Genesis 32, the story of Jacob and Esau. Jacob's wrestling with God before he meets with his brother Esau. Now, Jacob and Esau were twins. It said that they were wrestling in their mother's womb, presumably over who would be the firstborn, because in ancient Hebrew culture, to be the firstborn meant to receive twice as much of an inheritance as the secondborn, thirdborn, whatever. So it was a big deal. And so they're wrestling in the womb, it said. And when Esau is born first, Jacob is born grabbing onto his heel, trying to be the first. So the story goes. Obviously, this is mythology, but that's the story. And so Jacob, throughout his life, he's named Jacob, and Jacob means a heel grabber and a deceiver and one who will use trickery to get ahead. And so throughout his life, he does exactly that. He does get ahead, but he gets ahead through trickery. And one particular trick he pulls is stealing his elder brother's birthright by fooling his blind and ailing father into blessing him with the blessing of the firstborn as opposed to his brother. And in that patriarchal culture, once the blessing of the patriarch was spoken, it was spoken and it couldn't be taken back. You couldn't get the toothpaste back in the tube nor the genie back in the lamp. Once it was spoken, it was spoken. And so he received his brother's inheritance through trickery. His father was like, I can't undo it, boys. Sorry. And so they're estranged from one another. And they've been estranged for a while. And in the story in Genesis 32, they're on the eve of meeting together. Jacob hears that his brother Esau is coming to meet him, and he's got tons of people with him. And so he's naturally terrified because he thinks he's coming back for blood, right? So the point at which we start here is things that are estranged and things that don't seem like they belong together anymore are being magnetically drawn together again. And so part of this word I feel like I have to give is that for many of you watching, and I know it's true for me, that there are things in your life that have been scattered and shattered that you no longer feel connected to, but they're coming back together somehow, some way, and you feel it, and you don't necessarily know what that's going to look like or how it's going to work out. But there are fragments of your life that you have been estranged from that you're being drawn back together to these fragments somehow, some way. It may be just kind of coming full circle in your journey and realizing how events of your past were significant. It might be in terms of relationships, occupation. I don't know, but I really feel that strongly. Anyways, so Jacob is on the brink of this happening, and he sends his family, he sends all of his people away. He splits his group that he's traveling with up into two in case Esau meets one. Only half of it will get wiped out. He's really believing Esau's coming to kill him. He sends his wives and his children away, and he's sitting there at the ford of the Yabok, a body of water. And it says a man wrestled with him until daybreak. I just love the poetry of it. And he's there alone. He sends his family away. He's sitting there in darkness and stillness. And a man wrestles with him till daybreak. And naturally, he thinks it's his brother, right? Naturally, in his mind, you're meant to think that he thinks this is Esau come to get revenge. And so he wrestles with this man. And there comes a point in the wrestling where the man says to Jacob, let me go, for it is daybreak. And so here's one of the first symbols I want to bring out is, look, when you're on the brink of that transformation and the coming together of things that don't seem to belong together anymore, what the alchemists called the coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of opposites, that point at which things you don't think could possibly collide and coalesce do just that, and something new comes forth from that union. When you're on the eve of things like that happening, you will wrestle with a man until daybreak. Chaos of some kind will enter your life. It will. It just happens because that's how change is sort of forced. And I talked about this last week a little bit, but the role of chaos in our lives is to create more complexity because the universe seems to abhor sameness and habit.
And to vacuum. Yep.
And yes. And so it's always seeking to create and produce novelty. And one of the ways that it does this is through chaos, because chaos creates complexity. Complexity means that there's now more raw material to work with so that novelty can emerge. So the old monkey typewriter theorem, if you put a bunch of monkeys in a room, get them some typewriters and let them just bang away at those things, eventually, coincidentally, they'll reproduce the works of William Shakespeare, given enough time, mind you. But if you deconstruct things and you take the typewriter apart and you just put one rather dull monkey in the room and a ream of paper in the corner, and you give him 5 minutes, you're not going to get the work of William Shakespeare. But you add more chaos and complexity, more monkeys, constructed typewriters, you're more likely to get it. If you add even more complexity, you I don't know, double the number of monkeys, you give them more time, and you give them laptops with AI technology and predictive text, they're now you've increased the odds of them getting this done in a shorter space of time. So the more chaos, the more complexity, the more likely it is that novelty will emerge. So when chaos enters your life, whatever it looks like, that man wrestles with you until daybreak. That chaos is giving you more raw material to work with, giving the universe more raw material to work with, giving God more raw material to work with so that something new can come forth in your life, man. And so Jacob wrestles with this man until daybreak. And he says at daybreak, the man, which we know to be God in the story, says, "Let me go, for it's daybreak." So here's the thing. When you see the season changing, when you're going from darkness to light, when you're going from night to day, you've got to let go of things that you've gotten addicted to holding on to, right? Because you can get used to that chaos. And there comes a point when the season shifts, you have to learn to let it go. You have to, when you actually see the season changing, when you're at daybreak, you can't hold on to things that you'd held on to in the night season. They prepared you for the day, but they won't serve you in the day.
Right.
So when you come across a body of water and you hit the shore, you don't carry the canoe on your back. You leave it there. You can repurpose it, make a shelter out of it, use it to build firewood, but there's no point dragging a canoe through the forest. It got you there, and now honor it by either leaving it behind or repurposing it. So there comes a time where you might have to, there's things you got to leave behind. Now, Jacob says, "I will not let you go until you bless me." So the other lesson is let go of what you need to let go of when you see the season changing, but don't let it go until you've learned the lesson. Because if you let it go before you've learned the lesson, you will repeat the lesson. Okay? It'll happen again and again and again until you learn the lesson. And it's best to learn it the first time round.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. I don't want to go through the 7th grade 20 times. I'd rather do it once, right? So learn the lesson. Don't let the thing go, though, until you receive the blessing that it's trying to give you. And then Jacob, okay, it goes on a little bit. And Jacob then says, "Now you tell," or I'm sorry, the man says, okay, he blesses him. And the way he blesses him is by telling him, "What's your name?" They're asking, "What's your name?" He says, "Jacob." So seasons like this will force you to confess, who are you? Who have you been? Who have you become in this last season of your life? It'll force you to come to terms with your name. I'm Jacob. And then this divine being says to Jacob, "You're called Jacob, but from here on out, you will be called Israel, for you have wrestled with God and man and have prevailed." And that's what the name Jacob means. It means the God fighter. It can also mean one who is a prince with God, or one who is noble, because they won't let go even when it's divinity that they're wrestling with. So Jacob endures through the night, and as a result, this divine being calls forth his true identity. He says, "You've been called this, but now you'll be called this." And that name goes on to represent an entire nation. And then, as we get further in the story, and I'm about to shut up, about Sunday school's almost over, so I just laying this foundation. Jacob says, "Okay, now what's your name?" And this divine being says, "My name is not important." And then he touches Jacob on the socket of his hip, wrenches it, and Jacob is left alone again. And it says, from that day on, Jacob walks with a limp. Now, in antiquity, popular superstition would have had you believe that to know the name of a divine being was to gain control over the divine being. So Jacob is still kind of in that little bit of trickster mode. He's like, "Let me know your name. Just because we've been wrestling all night, might as well know your name." And in truth, this is an attempt to control reality, to gain control over reality. And the man says, "This is not about you controlling reality or divinity. This whole thing was not about you knowing my name. This thing was about you discovering your name. This is not about you learning how to control chaos. This is about you learning who you are, and that you can endure it." and come forth on the other end of it as something and someone entirely different. And he is, because he says it walks with a limp for the rest of his life. So he's different from that encounter. He's never the same again. And it also says that, so from that point on, the Israelites didn't eat that particular part of an animal where Jacob's hip was wrenched either. So this personal transformation became a nationwide transformation. Anyways, that's a long way of saying it. And it's kind of an esoteric interpretation of the text, but I felt this like unfurl to me like a prophetic blueprint for things that are like happening right now, and not just in my life, but I really believe in the life of people who are listening tonight. And I think it's probably a message I'm going to be compelled to share for a while here. But I really believe that a lot of us listening, we are at the end of a cycle, right? And so for me, it was a 7-year cycle. I know that you said that you spoke at the event you were just at about how your life has occurred in sequences of 7 as well. And I want to hear more about that. And but I feel like I know for an absolute goddamn fact that that was true, literally quantifiably true. And the night it dawned on me, I was like, Jesus. And here's the other cool thing, man. I love serendipities. I love synchronicities. I love when the universe just kind of like seals the message with a kiss, right? So, a blue moon, right? What's the phrase we use? Once in a blue moon, right? Yeah. Something that only happens like once in a great while. This might be a stupid analogy, but this is kind of the cosmic giggle that gets my attention. Just the silly way that the universe, that God seems to work, that gets my attention. So we play the Wordle every day in my house. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a game on the New York Times website where you just have to guess a word. That's it. And so every day you get like 6 chances to guess it. So every day I start with a particular word. I start with the word audio because it has most of the vowels in it, minus E and sometimes Y. And so you can kind of get a good idea of what vowels are in it. And you can kind of from there on guess it. The day before, I was like to my daughter, I was like, has audio ever been the Wordle? And she was like, I don't think it ever has been. Well, the very next day, audio was the Wordle. So it's a once in a blue moon kind of thing, right? Yep. And it's audio. It's a sound. It's a voice speaking, trying to get your attention. Also something very odd that day. 3 of my coworkers and myself all got flat tires at the same time. 2 of my coworkers' daughters, who both have the same name, injured the same part of their body while doing their pastime of choice. Again, these aren't necessarily positive synchronicities, but they were just weird piling on of coincidences that made me stop and be like, this is really weird how these things are happening in these sequences and with this much similarity. And then I was like, oh, it's a blue moon. Once in a blue moon. I get it. Jeez. I was like, I get it. That there is like a once in a blue. I really, God, I feel this so strong, man. I'm amped up tonight. It is not just the coffee. I'm just amped. It was there is a once in a blue moon opportunity for some of you, us even, knocking at the door in this season. That there is a season we've gone through of chaos and wrestling, and we're at the end of it now. We're at the end of it. You can tell it, you can see it, you can sense it, you can feel it, you can tell the dark. We're moving from darkness to light. It's daybreak. And that man with whom we've been wrestling is like, it's time to let me go now because the season is shifting. You don't want to go into the daytime still wrestling with the thing that was preparing you for the daytime. So you got to let it go. But before you let it go, get from it what you need to get from it. Learn from it what you need to learn from it. Learn your name. That's the most important part. Chaos brings out of you the truth of your being so you can face what's coming. And then Jacob is like, tell me your name. I want to learn how to control this. And God says back to Jacob, this is not about you controlling the uncontrollable. This is not about you knowing my name. This is about you knowing your name so that from henceforth, you know that you can face whatever comes your way. And I'm just telling you, this season has been about unlocking you. It's been about reintroducing you to yourself, man, because so many of us forget who we are. We get stuck in jobs that we hate, doing things that we hate. It just happens, man. It happens to everybody. And you get stuck, in relationships, and I'm not counseling getting out of a relationship or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like, we get in funks in our relationships, even our healthy ones. We get stuck doing tasks, maybe even studying a subject that you thought you wanted to go into this particular field, and now you're realizing this sucks. I hate this. It's draining my life force, and it's not just a matter of endure the pain of discipline or endure the pain of regret. That's a great little quip, but sometimes maybe you're doing something you're not supposed to do. And chaos comes into your life to interrupt and get you to shift. And it's all about bringing Jacob and Esau together, these opposites coming together. But the chaos comes first. The wrestling happens first. So you know yourself, so that when you come together, they're because maybe the reason there was the split in the first place is because you didn't know who you were, right? So, anyways, I just feel like there's a real shift, and I feel it for myself. And I'm not one to ever apply personal things corporately, because I know things happen to us as individuals. But I really felt this as a kind of corporate occurrence and a corporate happening. Um, and I'm going to shut up here in a minute, and you can tell me your thoughts on all of that. But I really feel it, and I felt it for me. I feel it in terms of calling. I feel it in terms of even employment and things along those lines, influence, platform, writing, all of that kind of stuff. I just feel such a shift, and I felt such a release. The day after we talked, that evening, I had a dream where I wrestled with my anima and animus. And if you know Jungian terminology, that's like the mythological masculine and feminine aspects that we both have. And either one of those can become out of control. And that's true.
Yeah, and dominant. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're quote unquote opposites, but they're meant to coincide, and that coincidence is what brings forth life. And that night I had a dream. I wrestled with these things and I got them to the floor and I got them under control, and then new life came about as a result. And I'm telling you, I woke up the next day and there was something in particular in my life that I have been tethered to unhealthily, in the name of survival and in the name of comfort and security, that I just felt this severance from. Like a soul tie was literally severed after our conversation that night. And I've been walking in the freedom of that severance since then, and possibility and concepts and revelation have been coming to me in ways that I have not felt in a very, very, very long time. And I don't know, that was a really long way of saying all of that, but these shells have been loaded in this shotgun all week, so they just had to find a way out. Anyways, Andrea, I'm going to step aside. What are your thoughts on that, or do you have thoughts of your own you want to share?
Well, I knew that that was an important conversation that we had, and I had just finished an interview.
Yeah,
I've had a boatload of interviews to do this week. For some reason, they all seemed to pile up on me after the Paracon, and I schedule things, usually well in advance, not thinking what are the other circumstances that might be present now that you're just coming off of a big event, probably exhausted. Do
yeah,
be careful, dear. But
mm,
I don't think of that while
yeah,
I'm scheduling these things, a month or two out.
right,
And so these were interviews that I was committed to, that I needed to do,
yes,
and that I rose to the occasion to meet the commitment. Um, and everything so far this week has gone splendidly well.
hmm,
Uh, and I will admit that I am really exhausted, but I think it's not just physical exhaustion, it's emotional exhaustion, because I've been putting so much of myself out
yeah,
out into the world, that I'm not protecting or guarding my core. And that's something that I need to learn to be more self. I need to practice more self-care.
hmm,
I need to practice more, getting proper rest in a proper sequence, and eating uh, in a more healthy way. Because when we were on the road, I mean, Jeff,
hmm,
I never sat down
hmm,
for a meal all weekend long.
yeah,
It was a half a piece of pizza there. It was a chicken finger there.
hmm,
It was, grabbing somebody's Coke on my way out the door to the theater and just
yeah,
saying, I hope this is mine. I'm taking it. Well, it's not a food group, and there's no nutritional value in it. And I keep putting garbage in so that I can have enough energy just to, but after a while, garbage in becomes garbage out, and you've got to be very mindful of that. So I've been really good about eating well since I got home, stayed completely away from junk food completely. But when you're on the road,
Hard to
that's
do that.
what's out there, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, we did stop and eat a real meal on the way to the zoo, but that was it. That was the
Mhm.
one and only time,
Mm.
that I ate all weekend long, anything of
Yeah.
substance and anything of any nutritional value all
Mm.
weekend long. So I had to think, I did think about that on the way home as I was eating a pack of pretzels on the plane.
Mm.
Like, this is dinner. This is dinner, and we're not going to get home until 11:30 Sunday night. So that
Yeah.
was a pack of pretzels was dinner on the plane. And so, you know what, as I was listening to you talk about Jacob and the wrestling that went on all night long, my interpretation, and I know that it was written to mean that he was wrestling with God, but the way that I feel about God consciousness is that we're
Mhm.
living, breathing
Yes.
manifestations of it.
Yes.
We're the way it sees its creation,
Yes.
and how we interact with each other. Spinoza said the eyes are the window to the soul.
Yeah.
And I think that when we're having that close, even combative, conflicted encounter, we're really fighting with ourselves.
Mhm.
We're really fighting with ourselves. It brings me back to the Cherokee adage about the grandfather telling the son, the grandson, that there are two wolves that are at work within both of us all the time. And one is goodness and kindness and purity and grace and
Yeah.
generosity of spirit. And the other one is greed and avarice and mean spirited and ugly and cruel. And the child says, well, if the wolves are fighting, which one wins?
Mhm.
And the grandfather says, it's the one you feed.
Yeah. Yes.
So, full
Yeah.
circle back to let's do something to maintain this vessel,
Yes.
because you can work it to death.
Yes.
You can work the vessel to death. And what
Yes.
was the message that I left with you
Mm.
when we finally wound down our hour-long conversation?
Mm.
Was, when it's just all too much, flip over and float.
Yeah. And a great interpretation, even a spin on the Jacob wrestling with God's story, maybe an esoteric spin and way to read it, is that he Jacob is told his name by the divine being, and then when he asks the divine being its name, it doesn't answer, and maybe it doesn't answer because it already did when it told Jacob his name, right? And so in that recovering of identity, right? When you know who you are, you don't need to know anything out there's name or nature so that you can control this, that, or the other. Because once you know yourself, once you're at peace with yourself and you let go and you cease the wrestling, that's even part of the self care aspect. Stop
Mhm.
fighting with yourself all the time, right? Stop stop beating yourself up for what you didn't do. Stop beating yourself up for what you did do, for sins of omission and for sins of commission and for mistakes you made, because for God's sake, sometimes the mistakes you make in sincerity end up building a bridge of incidents, Neville Goddard would call it, that leads you into the next place you're supposed to be. So even sometimes stuff like that, even errors you make, and I feel that for somebody listening, a mistake that you made in sincerity, and it doesn't even have to be in sincerity. You could have made it in arrogance and it can still work for your good. All right. But a mistake made in sincerity that you think might ruin you and be your undoing could also be the universe's way of causing you to look at things you wouldn't have otherwise looked at, to cause you to other doors and other avenues and opportunities to now appear to you that didn't appear to you before. So stop wrestling with yourself like the man, like God, like Jacob said to himself, if we want to interpret that way. Hey, the season is changing. It's daybreak. Let me go. Stop wrestling with me. Don't go into this. Don't waste and lose the blessings of what this next season could be because you're still so caught up wrestling with yourself.
Yeah.
Realize who you are, sink into it. Like you said, just float and let the current carry you. Reality is a river, and it will carry you if you lay back and let it do so.
Yes, it will. And it knows the way home. And
Yes.
we spend so much of our lives swimming against the raging current because
Yes.
we're so sure that what we want is up around the bend. We can't see it. We
Hmm.
literally can't see it. But
Yeah.
somehow we suspect that what we want is just around the bend, up out of sight. And if you just keep at it,
Hmm.
that eventually you'll get there until your shoulders are on fire and your lungs are burning for
Hmm.
lack of oxygen and your eyes are tearing and the current is pushing and it's unhealthy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
it's I think it's okay. I think it's okay, in terms of a metaphor, to do some of that in life in a measured way because I think it builds stamina.
Right. Right.
If
Yeah.
you want to build your strength, yeah, swim against the current. You're
Hmm.
going to build your strength. But the wisdom is in knowing when to flip over and float.
Yep. Yep. Even salmon swim upstream, but only during certain seasons. And even that's one species. The rule is go with the flow, not in an apathetic way.
Mhm.
Sometimes apathy looks like going against the current, right? We think we always got to be pushing and fighting and wrestling and jostling and cajoling, trying to make something happen to prove we're not apathetic. Sometimes sometimes we're apathetic in our wrestling. We just get up and we do the same thing every day and we hate it and it hurts and it's killing us. The opposite of apathy in that case is to just get on the raft and float,
Yeah.
because you have to fight to not fight in those moments, right? Because
Right.
that's how we are. Very people are far less lazy and apathetic than they're often accused of being, I think. I
Mhm.
think we are far harder on ourselves than we are easy on ourselves. We're far more yeah, we're far harder on ourselves than we are easy. And I think for the most part, people like to chide and, people are lazy and they're blah, blah, blah. I don't really, that's not my experience with people. My
No, it's
experience with
not
people
mine
is they're
either.
doing, yeah, not that they're not doing enough, but they're doing far, far, far too much. And that doing far too much is itself a kind of apathy, because you're apathetic doing things that aren't working. Most importantly, not just in the world, but they're not working for you. And that was Jacob. It was time to stop wrestling. It's daybreak. It's over. It's over. That is not the season we're in anymore, Jacob. So stop wrestling
Mhm.
with yourself. And for some of you guys listening tonight, you feel like you feel like you've got to prove something to yourself, prove something to a father who's maybe
Yeah.
not even around physically anymore to approve of it, but somewhere deep inside there's this urge to do and to move and to go forth and to prove. But you're never going to know or find out who you are until you stop that, because it's in the stopping that you find yourself. That's where it's at. It's in the stopping that all of, like you got a disco ball, right? And it's got light reflecting off of it and it's shooting out all these little beams everywhere. When
Mhm.
you turn the light off and it stops spinning, like symbolically, it all returns when it
Yeah.
stops, right? And that's when the singularity occurs. And so chaos builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. So we stop, and then everything comes together in a singularity, and then new creation can happen.
Yes.
So be free to slow down. Be free to float. It was we've talked about that even here on the show. But when you told me that, um, I don't know if you sent me that night or the next day. I don't know, but it came right on the heels of the whole conversation. That really hit me, and it's something we've talked about before, and it's something I've talked about before. But in that moment, there's a word in due season, right? And it was just, and it landed.
Mhm.
And so I thank you for that, and I thank you for the profound wisdom that was in that.
You're in transition. I am we're all in transition
Yeah.
all of the time.
Yep.
We're becoming our best self.
Yep.
And then I think that when we have achieved our highest purpose on this plane of action is when we exit
Mm-hmm.
and go on to our other work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what that looks like. None of us do.
Yeah.
I know that it is. I know that spirit exists. I
Right.
know that we continue on in some way, shape, or form. That this is just a pit stop in our grand existence,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a profound one.
Right.
And soul school is an important place to attend.
Yes.
And if we don't learn our lessons here, we're
Yeah.
going to learn them somewhere,
Yeah.
some way,
Yeah.
somehow, at some time.
Yes.
So if we want to advance our own course of our unique individual existence, we must learn to integrate with ourselves, and we must learn to find peace within the core of the conflict of that which wrestles within us at
Yes.
all times.
Yes.
So I think that it was important for me to have this conversation with you tonight,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that uh, it will resonate with a lot of other people as well
Mm.
who are watching. I can't believe, Jeff, we blow through an hour
Yeah,
like
we do.
it is nothing at all. Like it's nothing at all. Like time really is the illusion that I am constantly
Yeah.
accusing it of being. But yeah, hang around if you want for later and watch Soul School, and you can
Yeah.
meet the crazy guys that put together the Upper Peninsula Michigan Paracon in just a few minutes. I love you with all my heart. I love our viewers. I am so connected. I mean, we've built this remarkable family around Soul School, Jeff,
Yeah.
that it touches a lot of lives.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, I am grateful.
Yes.
And on that beautiful, splendid, blissful note of eternal love, I will say goodnight and class dismissed.
Peace.